The loneliest people always have the most expensive windows. That was the thought running through my head as I stood barefoot in front of the 40-foot glass wall overlooking Manhattan on New Year's Eve. Snow drifted between the skyscrapers like ashes falling from heaven while thousands of people filled the streets below, laughing, kissing, counting down to midnight with people they loved. My penthouse sat 73 floors above all of it, silent except for the crackling fireplace and the slow clink of ice against crystal as I lifted another glass of whiskey to my lips. My phone buzzed across the marble counter for the 20th time in an hour. Politicians. CEOs. Men who feared me pretending to respect me. Women who loved my money pretending to miss me. None of them mattered enough for me to answer. At 38 years old, Vincent Moretti owned half the city beneath him. Restaurants. Hotels. Nightclubs. Buildings with my name hidden behind corporations nobody could trace. Power was easy once people learned to fear you. But fear was a cold thing. It didn't sit beside you at midnight. It didn't ask if you'd eaten. It didn't touch your shoulder when the nightmares came back at 3 in the morning. I loosened my tie and stared at my own reflection in the glass. Dark suit. Dark eyes. A face newspapers called handsome whenever they talked about my charity foundations instead of the rumors attached to my name. The city saw a billionaire investor with old Italian money and political connections. The city saw what I allowed it to see. Behind me, the grandfather clock ticked toward 11:37. Another New Year's Eve alone. Another year pretending the emptiness didn't bother me anymore. Sir. My head of security stepped quietly into the room. Marcus never interrupted unless it mattered. The car is ready whenever you are. I grabbed my coat from the chair beside the fireplace. Let's go. The elevator ride down felt endless. Gold-mirrored walls. Soft jazz playing overhead. Luxury designed to impress people who still believed expensive things could heal broken souls. Outside, Manhattan hit me in waves of cold wind and distant sirens. Snow covered the sidewalks in dirty white slush while crowds pushed through the streets wrapped in scarves and excitement. My black Rolls-Royce waited beside the curb, engine humming softly beneath the falling snow. Marcus opened the rear door for me, but before I stepped inside, something across the street caught my attention. A woman stood outside a tiny corner diner with a little girl sleeping against her shoulder. She couldn't have been older than 29. White knit hat dusted with snow. Thin gray coat that looked nowhere near warm enough for 20-degree weather. The little girl in her arms wore pink gloves and tiny snow boots with holes near the soles. Even from half a block away, I could see the mother trembling from the cold. She reached into her pocket slowly and pulled out what looked like a few crumpled dollar bills. Then she did something I still can't explain. Instead of walking inside the diner for herself, she crossed the street toward an older homeless man sitting beneath a flickering pharmacy sign. The woman knelt beside him carefully and handed him a steaming cup of soup along with the last money she had. The old man looked stunned. The little girl stirred weakly against her shoulder. And for the first time in years, something inside my chest actually hurt. I should have walked away. Men like me survived by ignoring things that felt human. Compassion made people weak. Attachment made them predictable. And predictable men ended up buried beneath expensive headstones while their enemies drank champagne over the graves. But I could not stop watching her. Snow collected in Claire Bennett's hair while she smiled softly at the homeless man clutching the soup cup between shaking hands. She looked exhausted. Not the normal kind of tired either. This was deeper. The kind that settled into someone's bones after too many double shifts and too many nights wondering how to keep a child warm through winter. The little girl stirred again against her shoulder, tiny coughs breaking through the noise of the city. The sound reached me even across the street. Sharp. Weak. Wrong. Sir. Marcus stood beside the Rolls-Royce, waiting for instructions. I kept staring at the woman. Find out if there is a pharmacy nearby still open. Marcus glanced across the street carefully. He had worked for me 8 years. Long enough to know when not to ask questions. Yes, sir. The traffic light changed. Yellow taxis rolled past, splashing dirty slush across the curb while people hurried toward parties and rooftop bars. Nobody looked twice at the woman carrying a sick child through the snow. New York only noticed suffering when it blocked traffic. Claire adjusted the little girl higher against her chest and started walking downtown. Her boots slipped slightly on the icy sidewalk. She caught herself before falling, whispering something softly to the child. I found myself moving before logic could stop me. Keep the car behind them, I said quietly. Marcus opened the rear door. Sir. Just drive. The Rolls-Royce crawled through Manhattan traffic 20 yards behind her. Heat wrapped around me inside the leather interior while she fought freezing wind outside with a child in her arms. The contrast made my stomach twist unpleasantly. She passed glowing restaurants packed with laughing couples. Jewelry stores lit like museums. Hotel entrances decorated with gold ribbon and Christmas lights. Entire worlds she clearly did not belong to. Neither did I anymore. At the corner of Lexington and 52nd, the little girl suddenly coughed harder. Claire stopped walking immediately. Panic flashed across her face as she touched the child's forehead. Even from inside the car, I could see fear settle into her expression. Real fear. The kind no parent could hide. Lily, she whispered urgently. The little girl did not answer. Claire pulled back slightly, brushing snow away from the child's pale face. Lily, baby, look at me. My chest tightened. The child's head rolled weakly against her shoulder. Then her small body went completely limp. Claire froze for half a second before terror shattered across her face. No, no, no. Her voice cracked apart in the cold air. She dropped to her knees right there on the sidewalk, holding the little girl tightly while crowds moved around them like they were invisible. Lily, please wake up. Nobody stopped. Not the businessmen rushing toward parties. Not the couples laughing beneath umbrellas. Not the tourists filming fireworks advertisements above Times Square. The city kept moving because New York always kept moving. Marcus looked at me through the rearview mirror. Sir. I was already opening the door. Cold wind slammed into me the second my shoes touched the sidewalk. Claire looked up sharply as I approached her. Her green eyes widened with immediate fear. Smart woman. Every survival instinct she had was telling her men like me came with consequences. But all I could focus on was the little girl trembling weakly in her arms. Her lips had started turning pale from the cold. Move, I said quietly. Claire held the child tighter instantly. Stay away from us. Her voice shook, but there was steel underneath it. Protective. Desperate. Human. Something inside me cracked open at the sound. For one strange second, the entire city seemed to disappear around me. No sirens. No traffic. No fireworks exploding above Manhattan. Just the terrified sound of a mother trying not to lose the only person she loved. Snow melted against Claire's eyelashes as she held Lily tighter, her hands trembling so badly I thought she might collapse beside the child. Please, she whispered to her daughter, brushing damp strands of blonde hair away from the little girl's forehead. Baby, stay with me. I crouched in front of them slowly, careful not to move too fast. Fear lived in Claire's eyes now. Not fear of the cold. Not fear of the city. Fear of me. I knew that look. I had spent most of my adult life putting it into people. Your daughter needs a hospital, I said calmly. Claire shook her head immediately. We cannot afford one. The words hit harder than they should have. Not because they shocked me. Nothing about this city shocked me anymore. But because of how quickly she said them. Like she had already accepted there were things people like her simply did not deserve. Warmth. Safety. Help. Lily coughed weakly against her chest. A horrible sound. Thin and exhausted. Claire looked down at her daughter again, panic cracking through every wall she was trying to hold together. She has had a fever. Since yesterday, she admitted softly. I tried to bring it down but, her voice broke apart before she finished. Marcus stepped closer behind me. Sir, we should leave before the crowd notices. He was right. A few pedestrians had started recognizing my face beneath the falling snow. Phones were already appearing. But for the first time in years, I did not care about headlines or rumors or cameras. The little girl in Claire's arms looked too much like every broken thing I had failed to protect in my life. I reached for Lily carefully. Claire flinched instantly. Do not touch her. The sharpness in her voice surprised even her. I saw immediate regret flash across her face a second later. Most people softened around powerful men. Claire Bennett became sharper. Protective. I am trying to help you, I said quietly. Men who look like you usually come with strings attached. I almost smiled at that. Honest. Smart. Dangerous combination. Snow collected on the shoulders of my black coat while we stared at each other beneath the glow of a pharmacy sign flickering above the sidewalk. Somewhere in the distance, the city began the final countdown rehearsals before midnight. 10-foot digital clocks flashed across giant screens downtown while strangers kissed beneath falling snow. Claire was still kneeling on frozen concrete holding a sick child because life had not given her the luxury of celebration. If your daughter stops breathing in this weather, I said softly, you will not care what kind of man I am. Silence. Her eyes filled slowly with tears she clearly hated letting anyone see. Lily stirred weakly again, tiny fingers clutching at Claire's coat. Mommy, the word barely came out louder than the wind. Claire closed her eyes like the sound physically hurt her. That was the moment she broke. Not completely. Just enough for desperation to win over pride. She looked at me again carefully, searching my face for something. Kindness maybe. Safety. Humanity. I had no idea if she found it there. Please, she whispered finally. One word. Barely audible. But it changed everything. I slid one arm carefully beneath Lily's legs and lifted her gently against my chest. She weighed almost nothing. Too light. Too fragile. The little girl instinctively curled against the warmth of my coat while her small coughs echoed softly between us. Claire stood beside me slowly, still unsure if she had just made the worst mistake of her life. Marcus opened the Rolls-Royce door immediately. Warm air spilled into the freezing street. Claire froze when she saw the interior. Cream leather. Crystal lights. Enough luxury to feed a family for years. Who are you? She asked quietly. I looked down at the child sleeping weakly against me before answering. Someone who was not supposed to stop tonight. The inside of the Rolls-Royce smelled like leather, cedarwood, and money. Real money. The kind that insulated people from winter and sickness and fear. Claire sat stiffly across from me while snow streaked past the tinted windows outside. Every few seconds, her eyes darted toward Lily sleeping against my chest like she still could not believe she had allowed a stranger to hold her daughter. Honestly, neither could I. Lily's tiny body radiated heat through my coat now. Fever heat. Wrong heat. Her breathing sounded shallow beneath the soft hum of the engine. How long has she been sick? I asked quietly. Claire rubbed her freezing hands together before answering. 2 days. And you did not take her to a doctor? Shame flickered across her face so quickly I almost missed it. I tried urgent care yesterday. Her voice dropped lower. They wanted $600 up front because I do not have insurance anymore. $600. I had spent more than that on the whiskey currently sitting untouched in the penthouse upstairs. The realization left a bitter taste in my mouth. Marcus spoke from the driver's seat. Mount Sinai is 12 minutes away, sir. Claire immediately shook her head. No hospitals. I looked at her carefully. Your daughter can barely stay conscious. I know. Her voice cracked sharply. You think I do not know that? The words echoed through the warm interior of the car before silence swallowed them again. Claire turned toward the window quickly, embarrassed by the emotion slipping through. Manhattan lights reflected across her face, in soft gold and blue streaks while tears gathered in her eyes. She wiped them away before they could fall. Proud even now. What happened to her insurance? I asked after a minute. Claire stared out at the city for several seconds before answering. I lost my second job 3 months ago. Snow drifted across the windshield while traffic slowed near Rockefeller Center. Thousands of people crowded the sidewalks wearing expensive coats and carrying shopping bags beneath giant Christmas lights. Somewhere overhead, fireworks began testing early above the river. Then Lily got pneumonia in November, Claire continued softly. The hospital bills buried me after that. Pneumonia. My jaw tightened slightly. Lily coughed weakly again against my chest, stirring just enough for her tiny hand to grip the fabric of my coat. Instinctively, I adjusted her carefully, keeping her warmer. Claire noticed immediately. So did I. Men like me were not supposed to have instincts like that anymore. You have children? Claire asked suddenly. The question caught me off guard. No, you hold her like you do. Something about that answer stayed between us after she said it. Heavy. Quiet. Personal in ways neither of us understood yet. The car stopped at a red light near Fifth Avenue. Outside, a young couple laughed while taking selfies beneath white Christmas lights wrapped around bare trees. Their happiness looked effortless. I barely remembered what effortless felt like. Lily stirred again, eyelashes fluttering weakly. Mommy? Claire moved instantly closer. I am here, baby. Lily blinked slowly, confused green eyes landing on me for the first time. Small. Feverish. Too trusting. Who is that? She whispered. Claire hesitated. I answered before she could. Just someone giving your mom a ride. Lily studied me seriously for one sleepy second. Then she rested her head against my chest again like that answer was enough. My throat tightened unexpectedly. She trusts people too easily, Claire murmured softly. No, I said quietly, staring down at the little girl sleeping against me. Children usually know when someone is dangerous. Claire looked at me carefully after that. Really looked at me for the first time since stepping into the car. Not at the expensive coat. Not at the watch worth more than most people's rent. At me. Something uncertain flickered through her expression. And are you? She asked softly. Before I could answer, Marcus's phone suddenly rang through the front seat. He checked the screen once and his posture changed immediately. Tense. Alert. Dangerous. Sir, he said carefully. It is Lorenzo. My stomach went cold. Because men like Lorenzo only called on nights when something had gone very wrong. The atmosphere inside the car changed instantly. One phone call. That was all it took for the warmth around us to disappear beneath something colder. Marcus lowered the volume of the jazz playing softly through the speakers while snow continued drifting across Manhattan outside. What happened? I asked quietly. Marcus hesitated for half a second before answering. There was a problem at the harbor, sir. Harbor. Of course. Trouble always found me eventually, even on nights when I wanted to pretend I was still human. Claire noticed the shift immediately. I saw it in the way her shoulders tightened and her hand moved protectively toward Lily. Smart woman. She could feel danger without understanding it yet. "Take the call," I said. Marcus answered through the car speakers. Lorenzo's voice filled the interior immediately. Sharp. Nervous. "Vincent, where are you?" "Busy. You need to get downtown now. The Russians are refusing the deal unless you show up personally." I closed my eyes briefly. Of all nights. Handle it. I tried. "They are threatening to walk." "Then let them walk." Silence crackled across the line. Lorenzo sounded genuinely stunned. "Are you serious?" My eyes drifted toward Lily sleeping against my chest while Claire watched me carefully from across the seat. "For tonight," I said quietly, "I do not care." Even Marcus looked surprised by that answer. Lorenzo lowered his voice. "Vincent, this shipment affects everything next month. Then next month can wait." I ended the call before he could argue further. Silence settled heavily inside the Rolls-Royce afterward. Outside, fireworks exploded early somewhere above Central Park, flashing silver light across the windows. Claire stared at me cautiously now. "The Russians?" she asked softly. I almost smiled despite myself. "You heard that." It was difficult not to. Lily shifted weakly in her sleep again, her forehead still burning against my hand. Claire noticed me checking her temperature. "You really do know what you are doing with children," she whispered. I looked down at Lily carefully. "No. I just know what it feels like when nobody takes care of you." The confession slipped out before I could stop it. Claire studied me differently after that. Less fear. More curiosity. Dangerous in its own way. "You still have not told me who you are," she said quietly. "Most people in New York already knew my name. Either through headlines or rumors whispered behind closed doors. But hearing it from me suddenly felt strange. Personal. Vincent Moretti." Claire's face went completely still. Even exhausted and worried sick, she recognized the name instantly. Everyone did. Billionaire investor. Philanthropist. The man newspapers loved photographing beside senators and charity foundations. They never photographed the shadows behind those suits. "Oh," she whispered softly. Fear returned immediately after recognition. Not panic. Something sadder. Like she suddenly understood this moment came from a world far above hers. "You own the Moretti hotels," she said carefully. "Among other things." Claire looked down at her worn gloves after that, embarrassed by them suddenly. I hated how quickly people changed around money. But Lily stirred before the silence could grow heavier. Her eyes blinked open slowly. Fever glazed them bright green beneath the city lights. "Mommy?" Claire moved beside her instantly. "I am here, sweetheart." Lily looked up at me sleepily. "Are you rich?" Marcus coughed into his fist to hide a laugh from the front seat. I looked down at the little girl still curled against my chest beneath my coat. "Something like that." Lily considered this very seriously despite barely staying awake. Then she whispered the sentence that hit harder than anything Lorenzo could have said tonight. "Then why do you look sad?" The car went. Silent. Completely silent. Even Marcus stopped breathing for a second. Because children sometimes saw truths adults spent entire lifetimes hiding. And in that moment, staring into the eyes of a feverish 6-year-old girl who had absolutely nothing, I realized she had seen straight through me. I had spent years learning how to intimidate men twice my size without raising my voice. I had negotiated million-dollar deals while staring down people dangerous enough to ruin cities. Senators shook my hand carefully. Criminals feared disappointing me. Yet somehow, a 6-year-old girl with a fever had managed to ask the one question I could not answer. "Why do you look sad?" I stared at Lily for several seconds while snow and city lights blurred together outside the windows. Claire looked uncomfortable immediately, like she regretted her daughter saying it out loud. "Lily," she whispered softly, brushing hair away from the little girl's face. "That is not polite." "It is okay," I said quietly. But the truth was, it was not okay at all. Because the child was right. I looked sad because somewhere along the way, I had built a life so large there was no room left inside it for anything real. The car finally pulled beneath the covered entrance of Mount Sinai. Bright hospital lights reflected across wet pavement while nurses and security guards hurried through the snow carrying coffee cups and exhaustion. Marcus stepped out first, opening my door before the car fully stopped. Cold air rushed inside immediately. Claire reached for Lily instinctively, but the little girl had already curled herself deeper against my chest in her sleep. "I have her," I said softly. Claire hesitated only a second before nodding. "Trust. Small. Fragile. But there." The hospital lobby smelled like disinfectant and burnt coffee. New Year's Eve chaos echoed everywhere. Crying babies. Phones ringing. Tired doctors moving too quickly beneath fluorescent lights. The second I walked through the entrance carrying Lily, everything changed. Nurses recognized me instantly. People always did. Conversations lowered. Security straightened. Fear and respect moved through the room in equal measure. A young receptionist nearly dropped her clipboard. "Mr. Moretti. Get a pediatric doctor," I said calmly. "Now. No paperwork. No insurance questions. No $600 deposit demanded up front." Within 30 seconds, nurses surrounded us with blankets and equipment while Claire stood frozen beside me trying to process how differently the world treated rich people. I noticed the exact moment it hurt her. A nurse smiled warmly at Lily while guiding us toward a private elevator. "We are going to take very good care of her." Claire's eyes filled slightly. Not relief. Bitterness. Because nobody had spoken to her like that yesterday when she came alone. The private pediatric floor looked more like a luxury hotel than a hospital. Soft lighting. Quiet hallways. Fresh flowers near the nurse's station. Claire stared around in disbelief while doctors checked Lily's temperature and oxygen levels inside a spacious room overlooking the snowy skyline. "Her fever is 104, the doctor explained gently. "But you brought her in at the right time." Claire physically sagged with relief beside the hospital bed. 104 degrees. Lily had been walking through Manhattan in that condition while strangers ignored them. Anger settled heavily in my chest. Not explosive anger. Worse. Cold anger. Controlled anger. The kind that stayed quiet while it memorized every detail. Claire sat beside Lily carefully, holding her tiny hand while nurses attached monitors softly beeping beside the bed. I should have left then. That would have been the smart thing. Men like me did not linger around women with kind eyes and children who asked dangerous questions. But I stayed. Something about the room felt peaceful. Human. Claire looked up eventually and found me standing near the window overlooking the city. "You do not have to stay," she said quietly. I slid my hands into my coat pockets. "I know." "Then why are you?" The truth rose into my throat before I could stop it. "Because nobody waits for me anywhere else tonight." Silence followed that confession. Deep and personal. Outside the hospital windows, fireworks suddenly exploded across Manhattan in brilliant gold and silver streaks. Midnight. A new year beginning above the city. Lily stirred softly beneath the blankets, her sleepy green eyes opening halfway. "Mommy?" Claire immediately leaned closer. "I am here, sweetheart." Lily blinked slowly before looking toward me near the window. "Did he stay?" Claire glanced at me carefully before answering. "Yes, baby." Lily smiled weakly beneath the blankets. Tiny. Trusting. "Good," she whispered. "He looked lonely." There are moments in life so quiet they change you without permission. Midnight fireworks still exploded beyond the hospital windows, turning the snow outside silver and gold, but inside Lily's room everything had softened into gentle monitor beeps and the steady sound of her breathing finally evening out beneath warm blankets. I stood near the window with my hands in my coat pockets while Claire sat curled beside her daughter's bed, exhaustion pulling at every line of her body. She looked smaller now that the panic had faded. Fragile in a way she probably hated anyone noticing. A nurse entered quietly carrying fresh coffee and extra blankets. She smiled nervously when she saw me. Everyone smiled nervously around me. Her fever is already coming down, she told Claire softly. The antibiotics should help quickly. Claire looked like she might cry again from relief alone. Thank you. The nurse hesitated before leaving. Mr. Moretti made sure the pharmacy opened for her prescription tonight. Claire's eyes slowly lifted toward me after the nurse disappeared into the hallway. I looked away first. You did not have to do that, she whispered. Yes, I answered quietly. I did. She stared at me for several seconds like she was trying to understand something impossible. Men like me did not usually involve ourselves in strangers. Especially not poor women carrying sick children through Manhattan snowstorms. But Claire had no idea that I barely understood it myself. The truth was simpler and far more dangerous. Somewhere between Lily asking why I looked sad and Claire whispering please on that sidewalk, something inside me had started waking up again. And I was not sure I liked it. Marcus stepped into the room carefully. Sir, Lorenzo is downstairs. Of course he was. Reality always arrived eventually. I rubbed a hand slowly across my jaw. Tell him to wait. Marcus hesitated. He says it is important. Everything is important to Lorenzo. Marcus gave me a look that clearly said this was different. Claire noticed the tension immediately. You should go, she said softly. Your people need you. My people. Strange phrase. Accurate though. Men who depended on me to keep empires balanced and enemies controlled. Men who solved problems in dark rooms while the rest of the city celebrated holidays under pretty lights. I will handle it later, I said. Claire lowered her eyes toward her hands. People like you do not usually stay for strangers. There it was again. That invisible wall between our worlds. She still saw me as someone distant. Untouchable. Rich enough to exist outside normal human rules. She was wrong. Men like me were never outside the rules. We were simply trapped by different ones. You gave your last dollars to a homeless man while your daughter had a fever, I said quietly. Claire looked startled by that. I could not let him sit there hungry on New Year's Eve. Even when you had almost nothing. A sad smile touched her lips. Small. Tired. Beautiful in a way expensive women never manage to be. I know what it feels like when nobody helps. The room went silent after that because those words belonged to both of us. Lily stirred softly beneath the blankets again. Her green eyes blinked open halfway before landing directly on me near the window. You stayed, she whispered sleepily. I said I would. Lily smiled weakly before holding one tiny hand out toward me. Instinctively, I moved closer. Claire watched carefully while I took Lily's small hand gently between mine. Warm now. No longer freezing from the street. Mommy says good people stay when they do not have to, Lily murmured. The words hit somewhere deep in my chest. Dangerous place. Forgotten place. Before I could answer, the hospital room door suddenly opened harder than before. Lorenzo stepped inside wearing a dark wool coat dusted with snow, his expression sharp with urgency. The second his eyes landed on Claire and Lily. Confusion crossed his face. Then concern. Real concern. Vincent, he said quietly, glancing toward the child beside me. You need to see this now. Something in his voice turned the air cold again. Because men like Lorenzo only looked afraid when the problem was big enough to reach even me. Lorenzo rarely lost control of his expression. That was why I trusted him. Calm men survived longer in my world. But standing in that hospital doorway with snow melting across the shoulders of his dark coat, he looked genuinely unsettled. "Outside," he said quietly. Claire's eyes moved between us immediately. Fear flickered there again. Not because of me this time. Because instinct told her whatever followed men like Lorenzo into hospital rooms at midnight was not normal. Lily still held my hand weakly beneath the blankets. Tiny fingers curled trustingly around mine while machines beeped softly beside her bed. Something about that nearly stopped me from leaving. "I will be right back," I told her quietly. Lily blinked sleepily. "Promise?" The word landed harder than it should have. I could not remember the last time someone asked me for a promise instead of a favor. "Promise," I said softly. Claire watched me carefully while I stepped away from the bed. Her eyes followed me all the way into the hallway. The second the hospital room door closed behind us, Lorenzo exhaled sharply. "What the hell is going on in there?" I adjusted my coat slowly. "A sick child. Vincent." His voice lowered further. "The Russians pulled out of the deal after hearing rumors about tonight." My jaw tightened. "Rumors?" Lorenzo nodded once. "They think you are distracted." Dangerous word. In our world, distracted men became vulnerable men. And vulnerable men did not stay powerful for long. Hospital staff moved quietly through the hallway around us, pretending not to stare. Lorenzo glanced toward the closed hospital room door before speaking again. "Who is she?" "Nobody." The lie came too fast. Lorenzo noticed immediately. He had known me 15 years. Long enough to recognize things I tried hiding even from myself. "You stayed," he said carefully. "On New Year's Eve." I looked through the glass window of the hospital room. Claire sat beside Lily's bed brushing gentle fingers through her daughter's blonde hair while fireworks reflected faintly across the windows behind them. Warm scene. Peaceful scene. Scene that did not belong anywhere near me. "She needed help," I said quietly. Lorenzo studied my face for a long moment. "That is not why you stayed." Silence stretched between us. Because he was right. I had helped thousands of people before. Donations. Foundations. Hospital wings with my name carved into marble plaques. But those things had always felt distant. Transactional. Tonight felt different. Personal in ways I did not fully understand yet. "You remember what happened to your father when he got distracted," Lorenzo said softly. The words turned the hallway colder. I remembered. Everyone in our world remembered. My father had trusted the wrong people because he loved the wrong woman. That mistake had destroyed him slowly. Publicly. Painfully. "Do not compare this to him," I said sharply. Lorenzo raised both hands slightly. "I am trying to stop history from repeating itself." Through the hospital window, Lily suddenly looked toward the hallway like she sensed us talking about something heavy. Her little hand pressed weakly against the glass. Innocent gesture. Completely harmless. Yet something inside my chest tightened painfully at the sight. Lorenzo followed my gaze. "Jesus Christ," he muttered under his breath. "You actually care." The accusation hit harder than insults ever could. Because men like me were not supposed to care openly. Caring created weaknesses people could exploit. Families became leverage. Love became strategy. I had watched it happen my entire life. "This conversation is over," I said coldly. Lorenzo looked frustrated now. "Vincent, listen to me carefully. People are already asking questions downstairs. If enemies discover there is a woman and child attached to you, they are not attached to me. Another lie. Worse this time because I wanted it to be true. Lorenzo rubbed a tired hand across his face. Then leave before it becomes something dangerous. I looked back through the hospital glass again. Claire had fallen asleep. Sitting upright beside Lily's bed, exhaustion finally winning against fear. One hand still rested protectively over her daughter beneath the blankets even in sleep. Nobody had touched me with that kind of instinct in years. The realization settled heavily into my chest. Then Lily opened her eyes halfway and looked directly at me through the glass. Even exhausted and feverish, she smiled when she saw I was still there. And for the first time in a very long time, leaving suddenly felt impossible. I did not leave the hospital that night. Even after Lorenzo disappeared downstairs to handle the problems waiting in my world, I stayed standing outside that room longer than I should have, watching snow drift past the windows while Claire slept beside her daughter's bed. There was something strangely painful about seeing someone so exhausted still keeping one hand protectively over a child even in sleep. It reminded me of things I had spent years trying to forget. Around 3 in the morning, the pediatric doctor finally stepped out carrying a tablet and tired eyes. "She is responding well," he said quietly. The fever dropped 2 degrees already. Relief moved through me so suddenly it almost felt unfamiliar. "Can they go home tomorrow?" The doctor hesitated slightly. "Physically, probably." Something in his tone sharpened my attention immediately. "What are you not saying?" He glanced toward the sleeping mother and daughter inside the room before lowering his voice. "The little girl is malnourished." The words landed like ice water down my spine. "Explain." "Nothing extreme," he clarified quickly. "But she is underweight for her age. Vitamin deficiency too. Usually we see this when parents skip meals to feed their children instead." My jaw tightened hard enough to ache. I looked through the hospital glass again. Claire looked painfully thin beneath the oversized sweater she still wore from the street. Pale exhaustion carved shadows beneath her eyes. Suddenly every detail made sense. The trembling hands. The hollow cheeks. The way she had given away her last money while pretending she was not hungry herself. "Run every test she needs," I said quietly. "And put the expenses through my foundation account." The doctor blinked once. "For the child?" "For both of them." He nodded carefully before walking away. I stayed near the window another minute before finally stepping back into the room. Soft monitor lights illuminated Claire's sleeping face while Lily rested peacefully beneath warm blankets. The entire scene looked fragile enough to disappear if I breathed too hard. I loosened my coat quietly and draped it across the back of Claire's chair. She stirred almost immediately. Survival instincts. Light sleeper. Her eyes blinked open in confusion before landing on me beside the bed. "You are still here," she whispered sleepily. "Apparently." Claire sat upright too quickly, embarrassed. "I am sorry. I did not mean to fall asleep. You have probably not slept properly in weeks." A sad smile touched her lips because we both knew I was right. She glanced toward my coat hanging over her shoulders now. "You should not be this kind to strangers, Vincent." Strange sentence coming from a woman who had shared her last dollars with a homeless man hours earlier. "Neither should you," I answered quietly. Claire looked down at Lily sleeping peacefully between us. "She likes you." The words should not have mattered. But they did. More than they should have. "Children usually avoid me," I admitted softly. Claire looked surprised by the honesty. "Why?" I almost laughed at that. "Because children sense darkness better than adults. Because power always came with shadows attached. Because somewhere along the way, I had become the kind of man mothers warned their daughters about." But Lily had smiled at me anyway. "I do not know," I said finally. Silence settled softly between us again. Comfortable this time. Dangerous because of that. Claire brushed gentle fingers through Lily's blonde hair before speaking again. You still look sad, you know. I leaned against the hospital window overlooking Manhattan. Snow covered the city now in silver-white layers while the last fireworks faded into smoke above the skyline. Maybe some people get too used to being alone. Claire studied me quietly for several seconds. Or maybe they just forget they do not have to stay that way forever. The words settled deep in my chest before I could stop them. Then my phone vibrated sharply inside my pocket. Unknown number. I almost ignored it until a second message appeared immediately after. We know who the woman is. The blood drained cold beneath my skin. Slowly, I looked back toward Claire and Lily sleeping safely beneath warm hospital lights. And for the first time that night, real fear finally found me. Fear feels different when it finally reaches something you care about. For years, threats against me had rolled off my shoulders like rain against glass. Politicians lied. Rivals circled. Enemies whispered my name in dark rooms hoping to make me bleed. That was normal. Predictable. But standing beside Claire and Lily in that quiet hospital room while those words glowed cold against my phone screen, something unfamiliar twisted hard in my chest. We know who the woman is. I locked the screen immediately before Claire could notice the change in my expression. But she noticed anyway. Smart women always did. What happened? She asked softly. I slid the phone back into my coat pocket. Nothing important. Claire looked unconvinced. You suddenly look like someone stopped the world from breathing. Her words landed too close to the truth. Outside the hospital windows, dawn had begun creeping slowly over Manhattan. The snowstorm had softened into light drifting flakes beneath pale gray skies while exhausted nurses changed shifts in the hallway. Somewhere downstairs, reporters were probably already gathering around whatever business disaster Lorenzo was trying to contain. None of it mattered right now. Only the woman sitting beside me and the child sleeping safely between us. Dangerous thought. I forced my voice calm. I need to make a few calls. Claire nodded slowly but kept watching me carefully. You can go, she said quietly. You have already done more than enough. There it was again. That invisible distance she kept trying to place between us because she could not imagine someone like me staying without a reason. The problem was, I no longer understood my reason either. Lily stirred softly beneath the blankets before opening sleepy green eyes toward me. Are you leaving? She whispered. 4 words. Tiny voice. Somehow impossible to ignore. I moved closer to the bed instinctively. Not yet. Lily smiled faintly before drifting back toward sleep. Claire watched the exchange with something softer in her expression now. Less fear. More confusion. Maybe even trust. That frightened me more than the text message. My phone vibrated again. Lorenzo this time. I answered quietly while stepping toward the hallway. Talk. We traced the number, Lorenzo said immediately. Burner phone routed through Brighton Beach. Russians. Of course. How much do they know? Silence crackled briefly through the line. Enough to know there is a woman connected to you. Cold anger settled beneath my ribs. Controlled. Precise. How? Someone saw you leaving the hospital entrance with her earlier. Photos are already circulating privately. I closed my eyes briefly. One night. One single night of caring about something outside business and suddenly the entire city wanted to weaponize it. Do not let this spread further, I said quietly. Already trying. Lorenzo lowered his voice. Vincent, you need distance from them immediately. I looked back through the hospital room window. Claire had fallen asleep again sitting upright beside Lily's bed, my coat still wrapped around her shoulders while early morning light touched her face softly. She looked peaceful for the first time all night. I could not remember the last time peace had existed anywhere near me without being destroyed. No, I said finally. Lorenzo sounded stunned. What? If they are already being watched because of me, leaving them alone makes them vulnerable. Keeping them close makes them targets. He was right. That was the worst part. Every instinct I had built over years screamed to walk away now before emotions clouded judgment further. But another part of me remembered Claire kneeling in the snow feeding someone hungrier than herself. Remembered Lily asking why I looked sad. Remembered how the room had felt warmer simply because they existed inside it. Increase security around the hospital quietly, I ordered. No visible guards. Near the room. Lorenzo exhaled sharply. Vincent, that was not a suggestion. Silence followed. Then finally, understood. I ended the call slowly and turned back toward the hospital room. At that exact moment, Claire woke suddenly with a frightened gasp, eyes darting around the room in panic. It took me half a second to realize why. A man stood near the doorway inside the room watching Lily sleep. Tall. Unshaven. Cheap winter jacket smelling faintly of alcohol even from the hallway. And the second Claire saw him, all color drained from her face. No, she whispered shakily. How did you find us? The fear in Claire's voice changed something inside me instantly. It was not ordinary fear. Not surprise either. This was the kind of fear people carried after disappointment had turned into survival instinct too many times. The man near Lily's hospital bed looked rough around the edges in a way expensive people usually ignored. Early 30s maybe. Hollow cheeks. Bloodshot eyes. Cheap denim jacket damp from melting snow. But it was the way Claire instinctively moved between him and Lily that told me everything I needed to know. Protective. Defensive. Terrified. Claire, the man said softly, raising both hands slightly. Relax. I just came to see my daughter. Daughter. My stomach tightened unpleasantly. Lily stirred weakly beneath the blankets at the sound of his voice. Her small expression shifted immediately from sleepy comfort to uncertainty. Not excitement. Not happiness. Uncertainty. Children always revealed the truth adults tried hiding. You are not supposed to be here, Claire whispered shakily. The man gave a tired laugh without humor. I had to hear from a nurse that my little girl almost collapsed in the street. I stepped fully into the room then. The man noticed me immediately. His posture changed. Men recognized power instinctively, even without introductions. And you are? He asked carefully. Claire looked like she wanted the floor to swallow her whole. This is Vincent, she said quietly. The man's eyes narrowed slightly with recognition. Of course he knew the name. Everyone in New York knew the name. Vincent Moretti, he muttered under his breath. Jesus Christ. Lily looked between all three of us sleepily, confusion clouding her fever-softened eyes. Mommy? Claire immediately sat beside the bed and brushed trembling fingers through her daughter's blonde hair. It is okay, baby. But nothing about the room felt okay anymore. I kept my attention on the man. You are her father. He straightened slightly at that. Defensive pride. Daniel Bennett. Claire flinched almost invisibly beside the bed. Tiny reaction. Important reaction. Daniel noticed it too. Come on, Claire, he said tiredly. Do not look at me like I am some monster. Her silence answered for her. Snow drifted softly outside the hospital windows while tension thickened the warm room into something difficult to breathe through. I had seen this dynamic before. Too many times. Women learning how to make themselves smaller around men who disappointed them. Lily reached weakly toward Daniel from the bed. Daddy, she whispered softly. The sound physically changed him. His face softened instantly while he moved closer carefully. Hey, Peanut. Lily smiled faintly despite the fever. Mommy said you were working. Claire looked down immediately after that. Daniel noticed. So did I, yeah, he murmured quietly. Something like that. There was shame buried underneath the words. Familiar shame. The kind men carried when they knew they had failed people they loved. Daniel looked toward me again after a second. You paid for all this? Yes. His jaw tightened immediately. Pride wounded now. We did not ask for charity. Daniel, Claire whispered sharply. Stop. But I understood the reaction. Men who had already lost too much hated feeling powerless in front of strangers. Especially rich strangers. Lily needed help, I said calmly. That is all. Daniel stared at me for several long seconds. Then finally, why? Simple question. Dangerous question. Claire looked toward me quietly now too, waiting for the answer. Why had I stopped? Why had I stayed? Why did a man like me care whether a waitress and her sick daughter survived New Year's Eve? I had no good answer anymore. Because nobody else did, I said finally. Silence settled across the room. After that. Heavy. Honest. Daniel looked away first. His eyes drifted toward Lily sleeping weakly beneath warm blankets and medical monitors. Guilt carved itself clearly across his exhausted face. I tried calling yesterday, he admitted softly toward Claire. My phone got shut off again. Claire closed her eyes briefly like the confession physically hurt her. You disappeared for 3 weeks, Daniel. I know. Lily cried herself to sleep every night. His shoulders sagged beneath the cheap jacket. Broken man. Not evil. Somehow worse. Because broken people still hurt the ones who loved them. Lily stirred again before weakly holding one small hand out toward me instead of him. The entire room noticed. Daniel's face changed instantly. Confusion. Hurt. Realization. She likes you, he said quietly. Not accusation. Not anger. Something sadder. I looked down at Lily's tiny fingers curled trustingly toward me while Claire stared between us in silence. Then Daniel asked the one question I had been trying desperately not to ask myself all night. How long have you known my family? The question hung in the hospital room like smoke. How long have you known my family? Daniel asked it quietly, but underneath the exhaustion in his voice sat something raw and wounded. A father realizing another man had stepped into a moment he should have been there for himself. I looked down at Lily's small hand still reaching toward me from beneath the blankets before answering honestly. A few hours. Daniel blinked once like the answer physically confused him. A few hours, he repeated slowly. And she already trusts you. Claire looked uncomfortable immediately. Daniel, but he shook his head slightly, eyes still fixed on me. No. She barely talks to strangers. His voice softened when he glanced toward Lily. Especially men. The room went very still after that. Claire looked down at her lap while guilt flickered across Daniel's face again. I understood more than either of them realized now. Daniel was not cruel. Not dangerous. Just lost. The city was full of men like him. Men who drowned slowly beneath debt and disappointment until the people they loved started surviving around. The holes they left behind. Lily coughed weakly beneath the blankets, breaking the silence. Daniel moved closer instinctively, touching her forehead gently. Real concern. Real love. Even broken fathers still loved their children. You scared me tonight, Peanut, he whispered softly. Lily's sleepy eyes drifted between us. Mommy cried. Claire immediately brushed tears from her face before they could fully fall. Daniel noticed anyway. The shame in his expression deepened sharply. Claire, do not. Her voice cracked softly. Not right now. Morning light continued spreading slowly across the hospital room while New York woke beneath fresh snow outside the windows. Taxis moved carefully through white streets. People carried coffee cups toward jobs they hated. Somewhere downtown, businessmen were probably already discussing me over breakfast meetings without realizing I had spent the night sitting beside a sick child instead of protecting million-dollar deals. My phone vibrated again inside my coat pocket. Another message from an unknown number. Pretty little family. I deleted it instantly before anyone could see. Cold anger settled deeper beneath my skin now. Controlled. Focused. The kind that frightened people who knew me well. Claire noticed the shift in me immediately. "Vincent?" she asked carefully. I forced my expression calm again. "Nothing." Lie. Dangerous lie. Because suddenly every instinct I had was screaming the same thing. They were no longer safe simply because they had crossed paths with me. Daniel sat heavily in the chair near Lily's bed, rubbing tired hands across his face. "I lost my construction job in October," he admitted quietly without looking up. Claire stayed silent. "After that, everything kept getting worse." His laugh sounded hollow. "Turns out people stop calling back when your truck gets repossessed and your phone disconnected." "You disappeared," Claire whispered. "I know. Lily needed you." Daniel looked toward his daughter sleeping beneath warm blankets and machines softly monitoring her heartbeat. I was ashamed. The honesty in his voice surprised me. Most men lied when they failed. Daniel simply looked broken by it. I kept thinking I would come back once I fixed everything, he continued quietly. But every week things got worse instead. Claire closed her eyes briefly. Tears slipped free this time despite her trying to stop them. She waited by the window every night. Daniel physically flinched at that. Lily stirred weakly again before looking toward me instead of either parent. "Vincent," she whispered sleepily. "I am here." Tiny smile. Immediate trust. Daniel watched the exchange silently before finally speaking again. "Why are you really helping us?" Honest question. Hard question. I should have answered with something distant. Charity. Timing. Coincidence. Instead, my eyes drifted toward Claire sitting exhausted beside her daughter while sunlight slowly touched her face for the first time. "Because your daughter smiled at me," I admitted quietly. Silence swallowed the room whole after that. Even Claire looked stunned by the confession. Daniel stared at me carefully for several long seconds before something unexpected crossed his face. Not jealousy. Not anger. Understanding. "You look at them," he said softly, "like you are afraid something bad will happen." My jaw tightened slightly. Because he was right. The text messages. The rumors already spreading. The enemies watching from shadows. Fear had found me the second I started caring whether these people survived tomorrow. Then the hospital room television mounted silently near the ceiling flashed suddenly to breaking news. My face appeared across the screen beside a headline in bold red letters. Moretti business ties under federal investigation. Claire looked up at the television. Then slowly back at me. And for the first time since that snowy sidewalk, real uncertainty entered her eyes. The room changed the second Claire looked at the television. I saw it happen in real time. The uncertainty. The hesitation. The sudden awareness that the man who carried her daughter through the snow belonged to a world filled with headlines and investigations and whispered rumors people avoided discussing too loudly. On the screen behind me, reporters stood outside one of my downtown office buildings while bold red banners flashed words. Like corruption and federal inquiry beneath my photograph. Familiar accusations. Familiar noise. But hearing them inside a quiet hospital room beside a sleeping child suddenly made everything sound uglier than before. Claire slowly looked back at me. "Is it true?" she asked softly. Honest question. No judgment in her voice yet. Just uncertainty. That somehow hurt more. Daniel watched me carefully from his chair beside Lily's bed. Even the nurses moving through the hallway outside seemed quieter now, like the entire world had tilted slightly. I could have lied. Men like me survived through carefully constructed lies. Public lies. Business lies. Beautiful lies expensive enough to become truth. But Lily was sleeping 3 feet away beneath warm blankets because Claire had trusted me anyway. I could not look at her mother and lie now. Some of it, I admitted quietly. Claire's expression tightened slightly. Vincent, I built businesses in places where people like me survive by making difficult alliances. The word sounded colder spoken out loud. Daniel rubbed a tired hand across his jaw. That is a very careful way to answer. Careful answers keep people alive. Silence followed. Outside the hospital windows, the storm had finally stopped completely. Morning sunlight reflected across fresh snow covering Manhattan rooftops while the city tried pretending it had not spent decades feeding men exactly like me power and money. Claire stood slowly beside Lily's bed, my coat still hanging loosely around her shoulders. Are Lily and I in danger? There it was. The real question beneath all the others. Not who I was. Not what headlines said. Whether trusting me had become a mistake. I looked at her for several long seconds before answering honestly again. Maybe. Daniel stood immediately after that. Protective instinct finally overpowering exhaustion. Claire, we need to leave. Fear flashed across her face instantly because she wanted to agree. Any normal person would have. But Lily stirred weakly beneath the blankets before coughing softly, still too sick to move anywhere safely. Claire looked trapped between panic and reality. Nobody is touching your family, I said quietly. Daniel laughed bitterly. And I am supposed to trust that? My phone vibrated again inside my pocket. Another unknown message. Tick-tock. Cold anger settled deeper beneath my ribs. Enough. I turned toward the hallway door and spoke calmly into the silence. Marcus. My head of security appeared almost instantly like he had been waiting nearby the entire time. Dark suit. Controlled expression. Dangerous calm. Daniel visibly stiffened beside Claire. Move them, I ordered quietly. Private location. No electronic records. Triple security rotation. Claire stared at me in shock. Vincent, listen to me carefully. My voice softened slightly when I looked at her. The safest place in New York right now is wherever my enemies cannot find you. Fear and trust battled visibly across her face. Daniel looked unconvinced. You expect us to disappear with you? No, I glanced toward Lily sleeping peacefully beneath warm blankets. I expect you to let me protect her. Silence swallowed the room whole after that. Because every parent understood the helpless terror of almost losing a child. Claire's eyes slowly filled with tears again while she looked down at her daughter. Why us? She whispered shakily. Why are you doing all this for people you met one night ago? I wish I had some profound answer. Something dramatic. Something worthy of all the chaos already surrounding us. But the truth was painfully simple. Because when I looked out